to go ahead and get back to their table. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Hello. How are you? Can I ask you a quick question? For nursing, do we decide which one is nursing?
Nursing and social work.
You know that?
Today we're very fortunate to
All right,
have
thank you.
Dr. Charles Rigney. And Dr. Rigney has a local practice, Amistad Medical Professionals, where he treats patients with Alzheimer's disease and co-morbidities. He obtained his Doctor of Medicine in 1980 from George Washington University. Dr. Rigney is currently affiliated with the Valverde Regional Medical Center here in Del Rio. Please, let's all welcome Dr. Rigney.
Thank you. Well, I was lucky enough to catch most of the previous speaker, and she did an excellent job of really defining Alzheimer and talking about risk and susceptibility issues. So that frees you up and me for more interesting aspects of Alzheimer's. And really, we all make this mistake. Alzheimer is not a disease. It's the name of the doctor who discovered the disease, Dr. Aloysius Alzheimer. He was born in Prussia in 1858, and he was medical school in Germany, and he was a psychiatrist. His first job after medical school was working in an insane asylum for lunatics and epileptics. It takes special nerve, but he liked it, and there was one patient that he followed for 20 years. Not only was he a psychiatrist, he was a pathologist, a neuropathologist. And in those days, this is 1900, 1890, we would look at brain tissue under a microscope, as we do now. And he could see that the brain of, once this patient expired, had certain, is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, good. He discovered that the brain tissue of this patient that showed all the clinical manifestations of Alzheimer, that we call Alzheimer's disease now. He had a collection of protein that is best described as just a blob. It's called beta amyloid, and everybody has beta amyloid in their neurons. It's a routine breakdown product, and it's usually handled very well. But in some cases, it's not. And there's genetic links to people that store beta amyloid well without problem. But then there's been genes identified that cause an abnormal accumulation of this protein. So, and it's those subsequently found out that it's those people that don't handle beta amyloid regulation very well that build up these amorphous blobs inside the cells of their brain, the neuron. The neuron is the name of a cell that does the actual work. I asked my wife, well, I don't have any slides, thank goodness. I used to, but my first training was in anatomy. But I asked her, what could I use to create this vision of what it's like to be a neuron that's accumulating too much beta amyloid? And she said, lava lamp. And I know you know what lava lamp is, but in case you don't, I plugged one in, and in about 4 or 6 hours, you'll see what these globs, these amorphous globs do. So imagine that lava lamp as a single neuron, okay? The brain is the most complex organ we have. It's very important, and we have over a billion neurons when we're born, and when we're born, those neurons aren't connected yet, but they do become connected and gain their powers of organization and intellect, and they do that by communicating with each other. 1 billion neurons is a lot, but for every single neuron, there's 40,000 synapses. And synapses are how the neurons talk to one another. They're the touch points, okay? They're the connections. So, I mean, billion. Let's get a little respect for what's a billion, okay? In units that cannot be artificially manipulated. So we'll say what's that? Time. So just to get a perspective and respect for the term billion. 1 billion seconds ago was 1959. 1 billion minutes ago, Jesus was around. 1 billion hours ago, our ancestors were in caves. We were in the Stone Age. So that's that. And then 1 billion days, we weren't even on the earth. Okay. And I was going to let it go with that. I wasn't going to mention money, but there's a sign out there. My wife said, hey, there's a sign that says that the cost of Alzheimer's is $183 billion, right? So I guess it's okay. I can tell you. Don't leave this out, but I can do it now. They throw around the term billion now. So $1 billion ago, it was only 8 hours ago. So we're spending now, okay? So I said it, and I'm okay with that because you guys had it out there. It costs $183 billion. So you understand what billion is. So 1 billion cells, 1 billion neurons that we're endowed with, that's more than the number of stars in the galaxy that are in the Milky Way. And then when you add 40,000 connections to those 1 billion cells, that's more planets or stars in the universe. It's huge. It's in the trillions. So the brain is complicated, and it needs to be maintained and taken care of. So of the things that we can control, that's really important. I thought an excellent job was given to that. Things to preserve blood supply to the brain. I mean, things you can't control, like blood pressure, your diet, weight. Those things are all good for the brain. What's good for the brain is puts you in a lower susceptible risk factor for disease. So when the brain cell, well, babies are born with 1 billion brain cells, and actually they're not connected, but it takes 10 years or longer. Those early years are really important to develop those synapses. These brain cells are not myelinated. They don't have a special coating. Normally a brain cell can send their job is to send impulses. They're called action potentials. So that's how they communicate. And they travel at about 60 miles an hour, which is fast. If you have some injury or damage to the neuron, it slows it down. In multiple sclerosis, it's slowed down to maybe 6 miles an hour. So that's why you'll see slowing of psychomotor skills in multiple sclerosis patients. But in Alzheimer's, what's happening out is this protein is building up inside the cytoplasm, or the space of a neuron, along with some other undesirable proteins. Are called, I call them tangles or hairballs. You can imagine what that is. I didn't bring one, but earbuds. If you're trying to get if you got flexible earbuds, you know, you're just all in a tangle. It takes forever to get them undone. Well, that's what a tangle is, and that's also seen in an affected neuron. So when you get enough of these inside one cell, it really slows down that cell's activity, and then to the point where it stops operating. And depending on what part of the brain the cell is in, you'll see symptoms, but these symptoms can be 10 years beyond when you can see them on a microscope. But we don't biopsy brain in patients that are alive and not showing symptoms. And so usually you get to this knowledge in post-mortems, okay? That's why they say the pathologist is always right, but sometimes late. But you can still learn a lot that way. However, there is some good news, some good hope. This Dr. Daniel Amen, like Amen. He's a double board certified psychiatrist, and he runs clinics in America now, about 7 of them, and he's a pioneer in imaging the brain while the brain is actually working, which is all the time. The brain never sleeps, never. Those billion brain cells are always on. So the center for your awake, well, that can have less activity when you're asleep, but the rest of your brain is very active. So I don't believe that we only use 10% of our brain. If we were to lose 10% of our brain, it would be very noticeable. So, you know, like termites that never sleep, they live 33 years. I learned that from the Orkin man. And rust never sleeps. That's the name of an album, right? What's his name? It was great. But you can't put rust to sleep if you block its access to oxygen. It will not, it'll stop. But if your brain ever stops, you're dead. And, you know, it's like, so it's always alive. And the reason we know that is we can do PET scans. I'll call them PET scans, okay? But he's got it's called a SPECT scan. It's a little cheaper, and you can do them in his clinic. And it actually shows brain activity. And the brain is measured by blood flow, amount of blood flow. Certain areas of the brain, when they're engaged and active, will show more blood flow than others. So he's done over 90,000 scans now. When that book was written 9 years ago, it was 30,000 scans. But he has the largest database of brains that are normal and abnormal. You remember Frankenstein? Abnormal. He's also studied the brains of criminals, brains of patients with ADD, schizophrenia. So he has the largest database, and he can show you what a brain looks like on cocaine, a brain that's normal, and you can just go to the website, amenclinics.com, and you can see visual representations of the brain now, so without having to biopsy a brain. They say that his brain scan has proved with 92% accuracy Alzheimer disease. So now it's like, why do we want to know? Well, it's I thought a good points were made, and I can take it one step further. That genetic mutation I was telling you about that increases your susceptibility risk for Alzheimer. It'd be good to know it if your grandchildren play football, because if you have this double mutation for one of those genes, you're at a 25% risk of developing dementia with multiple concussions. And then there was an article in a very recent medical journal where they did brain scans of college football players before and after their 4 years of career. And an area of the brain that's very important for memory, recent memories, is called the hippocampus. And they noticed a smaller size in hippocampus in these football players. So that in itself carries a big risk for dementia that is associated with Alzheimer's changes. So it might be good to know if you had a relative that was going to play contact sports. And then you want to protect anybody that had that. But that's going, it's like, yeah, protection is important. You know, it's like, so that's a good idea. And Dr. Amen gives a lot of reason and hope for maybe, well, detecting Alzheimer's, but possibly changing the course of it. There's been some very good studies at Tufts University over 10 years ago with rat brains. We can't do this with humans, but in rats, a rat is mature at 3 months, and that means he can go on and have families. So their brains age pretty fast. An old rat, an older geriatric rat is a year old, and some rats live to be 3. But their brains show aging changes, and among those changes is amyloid deposition in the neurons of their brain, just like in humans we study at autopsy. So they did a study with rats, young rats, juvenile rats, and older rats, adult rats, and finding cheese going through a maze. Well, the younger rats did outperform the older rats in finding the cheese. They got there quicker. However, these scientists at Tufts University supplemented the rat chow of the older rats, some of them, with blueberry powder extract. And in 2 months, those older rats who were slower at finding the cheese, they did as well or better than the younger rats. So they didn't just stop with that, though. With rats, you can euthanize them and do what's called a necropsy. Okay, autopsies are examination of humans after death. Necropsies are examinations, pathological examinations of animals. Okay, so when they looked at these rat brains, we know from looking at young rats, old rats, there's a certain accumulation of amyloid. We'll call it normal aging in rats. And that's in us too. But the rats that were given the blueberry powder extract in their rat chow every day after 2 months did better, their brains showed significantly less amyloid accumulation. So that is significant. That is significant. That was over 10 years ago. In an article talking about the benefits of phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are your colorful vegetables, like blueberries. And cauliflower, even though it's white, is a phytonutrient. And why is that important? Well, they have antioxidants. And we've all heard about benefits of antioxidants. But it's really hard to prove what gets through our blood-brain barrier. But if blueberries do the job in rats, you know, I'm thinking that's a good safe thing. And Dr. Amen calls blueberries, he calls them brain berries. And he's right. So now the bilberry is the English version of a blueberry. So when you go to the vitamin store and you see bilberry, you can get those. One little, and you can get blueberries too, by the way, and you get them frozen. And I know that the concentration of phytonutrient is higher in the miniature versions. So you know there's cherry tomatoes, and then there's your plump, big red tomatoes, right? Well, the antioxidant lycopene, it's in tomatoes, and it's very good. Well, it's a lot more concentrated in the cherry tomatoes. So if you're going for, value and antioxidants, you want to buy the smaller version. Same thing in blueberries. The plump, cultivated blueberry versus the small one, the wild blueberry, okay? The wild blueberry is a lot sweeter, tastier, and it has 1/3 more of its phytonutrient, 1/3 more, okay? So, that's, if you can get wild blueberry, you can do it. And, Swanson's, it's a vitamin warehouse in Fargo, North Dakota. They're open like our brains, 24/7. And they sold wild blueberry extract for a long time, and now it's harder to get. But they'll sell you blueberry extract, and you can get blueberry anywhere. So, try it. It's a good one. Okay. So, there's also an indictment on television and video games, and he makes a good case for it. But in the 90s, I was living on the West Coast for the 24 years before coming here. We read a newspaper that used to be pretty good, the Chronicle, and there was a study, and I have a copy of it somewhere. It says how TV watching numbs the brain. Okay. Well, what they did was the kind of studies that Dr. Amon did, looking at how active different parts of your brain were during your activities. And they looked at people watching television versus people eating a TV dinner, okay? When they were watching television, and it didn't say what the programs were, I believe there are really excellent channels, and on major channel, there's good educational TV, but still, we know that when you turn on a screen or a video, you're distracted and you're looking. And they found that the brainwave activity in the person eating the TV dinner, they showed more activity just choosing what to eat than the person watching this television program. So that's serious. That's why we call it the plug-in drug. If you want to quiet somebody down, you turn on a television. The brain goes to sleep, basically. And then he also makes a link between video games and ADD. So those first 10 years, 1 to 5, those kids, it's really important spending time with them and not putting them in front of a video of any kind. I don't care if it's Teletubbies or I see a hand this soon. But anyway, write it down because we're going to...
Write it down?
Yeah, write it down. I'll take all questions. So, anyway, Dr. Amon gives us a lot of good reasons to be hopeful that we can come up with some good treatments for something that we don't have a treatment for now. Sir William Osler, he was a famous physician in Europe around the turn of the 19th century. If you couldn't treat it, doctors like to treat patients and that they have a chance of healing. But if there wasn't anything he could do, in those days he would say, well, go to Egypt. And in those days you could say that, And then they asked him, why'd you do that? And they said, oh, because you can't do any more for them. So when I was asking my colleagues if they had any pathogens of wisdom or something to tell, about Alzheimer's, they get real quiet. Doctors don't like to talk about it. So it's not easy talking about something that there's no cure for right now. And the demographics, think about this, 1 out of 5 women are going to develop Alzheimer, and 1 out of 10 men. But most of your caregivers are women. $183 billion, that's mostly women taking care of their parents. And they're the ones at the most risk. So after the age of 60, the incidence of Alzheimer increases, it doubles every 10 years. So in the nursing home, 50 to 60% of our patients do have Alzheimer. I just did rounds last month. Now I'm seeing, oh yeah, you know, they have a long list of co-morbidities, but Alzheimer is on a lot of them. So, because they can't take care of themselves. Now, the genetics is curious. You'd think that these mutations of this gene that handles the cell's metabolism of beta amyloid, you would think that that wouldn't have a good purpose. But in some populations, sub-Saharan Africa, the Aborigines in Australia and Malaysia, well, 40%, down to 23% of those people have that gene, but they don't get Alzheimer's. In Africa, you talk about African Americans, you're right. Americans of African descent, these are people that have African blood and live and were maybe born and raised in the USA. So I'm going to call them Americans because I think that's who they consider themselves to be. And then they're of African descent. They will have this gene, and this gene does put them at increased susceptibility for the risk of Alzheimer. But the same gene in their relatives who live in countries where you are not sure where your next meal is coming from, there's a negative correlation between Alzheimer and heart disease. So the same gene is different for those same people who are living in different continents. In a country where you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you have to forage, that mutation is called a thrifty gene. That allows them to go through famine. Okay? So it's not always the gene, it's external factors, it's geography. Geography matters, big time, big time. So, and then half the people that have the gene aren't going to have Alzheimer. So, I'm just thinking this genetics is still like in that Forrest Gump movie. Life is like a box of chocolates, you don't know what you're going to get. And that's the thing about genetics, okay? There's so many external factors, and we just don't know yet. See, to have something proven, you have to have a model, and in this case, it'd be humans, where you know that under certain circumstances, this human will develop Alzheimer's, and then you're going to do something to see if you can change it. Well, we can't do that. You know, the Nazis tried it, they did it, they did those kind of experiments with people, but they're not moral. So, that's why we call these susceptibility risk factors. They're not causative, they're just associated. And the strongest risk, of course, is age for this, but it's not age dependent. We've seen these beta amyloid deposits in people with early dementia, even in their 30s and 40s. So it's not age dependent, but it does show itself with age. But, you know, it's like life is a risk. Come on. Nobody gets out of here alive. And it's like some people with Alzheimer's actually live to die of other natural causes. So it's not always a death sentence. And everybody wants to come up with immortality, you know, and try to manipulate the genome. That is going to be interesting. You know, we can see that maybe in lab animals, see how it works, but it's it's getting into metaphysics, actually. So the brain is our best and most important organ, most complex. A piece of brain the size of a sand is going to have 100,000 neurons, and each of those neurons is going to have 40,000 synapses. That's just a piece of sand. So we have a lot of reserves in the brain. So you're not going to really see clinically dementia until maybe 30% of critical brain cells are affected. So, you know, it's we're lucky we have that. And the more, I mean, there's different hypotheses. For instance, it's called the education or knowledge reserve. The more information, the more educated you are, the more things you do to challenge your brain, you can put yourself at less risk of dementia. But, you know, it's like Dr. Amon makes a good point. You can be a brain surgeon, but if you do the same operation every day, it's not creating new connections. You're not challenging yourself. So if you want to maintain brain health, you have to really challenge yourself. You do. So reading scripture is also very good. I don't know why, but it's been proven. Like in studies of religious communities, it's called the nun study, N-U-N. They study nun brains and they create a lot. Well, their brains showed really through these exams. I mean, really healthy, masses. They didn't really show the evolutional changes that happen with age. Men's brains shrink faster than women's, but I look at Alzheimer's more. So you can't really, but there are things you can do. There was one, my predecessor did such a good job. She freed me up to go off into all these things. But of some medical conditions that show dementia but are reversible, there was just one that she didn't mention, and it's kind of rare, but I was fortunate enough to have a patient with that. And then 2 years later, his brother came down with the same thing. It's called normal pressure hydrocephalus, and it mimics dementia, but it's totally reversible with a shunt that takes fluid off the brain and runs it back into the abdomen and just recirculates. And it's like night and day. It's called NPH, normal pressure hydrocephalus. And it was interesting. And the other one, when you have low blood sugar or high blood sugar, that can mimic dementia. And then, of course, she mentioned alcohol, but there was a vitamin she didn't mention, B1, okay? And the Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome is a dementia that is related to alcohol and B1 deficiency, thiamine. So, diet's important. Diet's important. So I talked about, let me see if I got all the big things that I really I thought this was important. Dr. Amon does what's called a SPECT. It's a single proton emission computed tomography. That's what it is. Think of it as a brain scan. It has a 92% positive predictive value for Alzheimer's disease. And studies of the hippocampus tissues show a 30% loss in size before symptoms of Alzheimer's manifest. So, and remember, football players showed this. Ones that got a lot of contacts on them. Not all of them, but some of them did. You wonder if they had that gene. I don't know. But if you're going to do genetic studies, I just suggest you pay for it in cash and stay off the radar, because this is personal information. Nobody needs to know. you have to maintain that privacy. And the only way you're going to do it is, well, you're going to have to maintain it. And if you're a grandparent and you want to protect your kids and you're going to play contact sports, that's the only thing I can want. You know, genetic studies are good that way, but well, you know, that does it. It's only 10:10. I'm caught up. So I'll take questions because we have 10 more minutes, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay, the first lady over there far left. Yes, please stand up.
I will.
Thank you.
Okay, let me, you just said that the brain decreases by 30%, concussions, football players, okay. My first question is?
I said the brain, in aging, the brain decreases in size. I didn't say how much. I said in the study.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
30% is big.
Okay. So my first question was, does the brain shrink when you're aging? And the answer is yes. And do strokes or vascular blockages, do they affect brain size, shrinkage?
They do.
Yes. And do the brain cells that are not firing or aren't getting the B1, the B12, and decreasing in their efficiency, do they, when they reduce or quit firing completely, does this also reduce your brain size?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if somebody says, your brain is not the size that it should be for someone who's 66 years old, is this an indication of non-healthy living, or could this be an indication from research that maybe they're on the track for the dementia and the Alzheimer's? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but the Alzheimer diagnosis is not made, not really with any imaging, it's made clinically. Right?
Clinically.
Right.
Okay.
You know, people with small brains can still make good executive decisions. And people with strokes, they can be retrained and bring on new, they can recruit. Oh, one of the good things that Dr. Rigney said, by golly, you're gonna like this, we can build new brain cells, improve it. Yeah. So with rehab, if you have a reversible, or let's say a stroke, okay, you've got certain cells that are offline and they're going to be offline, but it's not progressive. So you can recruit activity in other cells, okay? So simple things like playing ping pong. It involves upper and lower extremity coordination. It involves planning. Well, it's more than brain surgery. If you're playing ping pong, you're using more of your brain than a brain surgeon was doing a routine operation. So, table tennis. Yeah, you can.
Okay, now this is specific. With a mother-in-law who has, well, I'm going to say she has dementia, and although the doctor says, oh, this is just normal aging, okay, but she also has that macular degeneration.
Yes.
So she can see a little bit of peripheral, but she can't read menus, she can't really see the TV.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to lead her. What I'm wondering is, you were talking about stimulating children up to the age of 10. Well, here we have this dementia, almost blind person, and she sits in front of the TV 24/7, and and doesn't really eat TV dinners, but she does pick her food. And she has a connection with other adults like twice a week for an hour and a half. Other than that, she's really not connected. In trying to help her brain, she can't read like in the nun story.
Right.
But would it be better to take her off the TV and make her listen to books on tape, or
Exactly.
what in the home for someone that?
I would say, listening to radio or Mozart or Johnny Cash reading the New Testament. He's got that on CD. radio engages the brain. Television numbs it. I'm not, this is research. This isn't Dr. Rigney, this is old. This goes back 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's why, you know, my mom said we were too poor to get a television, so what I do, I went to the library and learned to read really fast, and that helped. So it wasn't, I had to find out what happened on a wagon train at school. You know? But maybe she was right. She was, you know?
Well, and the processing will go in from the books on tape or the radio, but 3 minutes later, she doesn't really know where she's
Right.
in the story. But at
Exactly.
least that's
engages
making the
you more.
brain fire a little bit more
It
than
will.
the TV.
She's probably using the television as a radio.
Yes.
And it's poor radio, it really is. Television's very poor. Yeah. The radio, if you close your eyes and just listen to television, those guys are idiots watching the Spurs. You know? Anyway. Yeah.
And what about exercise?
Well,
Even though
exercise is terrific. He talks about that. It gives more blood to the brain.
Okay.
The brain lives on blood supply and glucose.
So it's really important to move your
Yeah.
arms, sit in
He
the
says if you
chair, walk
exercise
up.
3 times a week, you reduce your risk for Alzheimer's quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
But I know that you'll have a better life. There's a study in Hawaii. If you walked 2 miles a day, you live without any comorbidities. You live pretty well. And if you walk more than 2 miles a day, you live even longer. In Hawaii, of course, Hawaii is a clean air state. We do have probably the longest lifespan of the America. If you call it America, I don't. It's an island. It's not. It's not culturally. It's not what our 48 states are. Alaska and Hawaii are different. You just have to go there. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Please, more questions. We got 5 more minutes.
What's the impact of sleep, Doctor? Does it help or decrease?
Sleep is essential for brain health and body health and energy and maintaining your immune system, as well as antioxidants and good diet. Sleep is good. Some people require less, but it's pretty important.
On the vitamin deficiency, the vitamin 1 and 12, does it need to be prescribed? Does it need to be a test to find out the deficiency?
It's easy to screen blood tests for the vitamin deficiencies. You can do that. And a trip, I mean, when you go to the emergency room and there's a change in altered, consciousness, they do a good screen and they'll get 90% of everything that we talked about. And that's what most good doctor will do. I do the other 10% to a neurologist. Dr. Rigney doesn't want to make the diagnosis of Alzheimer's all by himself. We like to share that with specialists, and it takes time. You just don't make it. And you got to have independent observers and family and input that way. But most of the common things we can rule out real quick, and that's why we do all those tests. We don't do it to prove dementia. We do it to find out if it's reversible or not. Yes, ma'am.
How often should an Alzheimer's patient see her doctor?
Well, it depends on how they're doing, if they're on prescribed medication or not. If they're not seeing a doctor, or maybe they are, but if you are wanting to have annual health services, you have to see a doctor. It's all a case by case. It depends how they're doing. And a lot of patients, like I said, are in nursing homes, okay? Because they don't have family to take care of them.
What about the ones that have family?
Well, I think the family needs to see the doctor to understand what they can do. It's a 36-hour day, and that's the name of the book for the families of Alzheimer's. And, oh boy, let's see. One of my professors, he was a World War II veteran, and he was an infantry officer, and he was a neat guy. And he's passed away, but before he was a historian. His name was Page Smith, and he wrote these articles on aging in the Chronicles, so I would read it. He said things like, you got to dare to grow old. And another thing, he has this book, Old Age is a Different Country. So I'm going to get that book and read it. But before that, he's written a lot of good articles and books. His area was George Washington and Jefferson. He was an American historian. But he came back and got his PhD and then became provost at a college. He was quite a guy. But he's written some good articles on aging.
And what was his name once more?
Page, P-A-G-E, Smith.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you look it up, you'll see. You go to Abe. My favorite source of books, cheap, is Abe, like Abe Lincoln. ABE book.com.
Okay.
Okay. I bought this book. I mean, full price. It was $15. But this was at San Francisco Airport. I was coming out here for an interview about 4 years ago. So I bought it, and then I lost it. But I went to abebook.com. I got it $3.95 to the door. That's a lot easier. So abebook.com, and you'll see. All you have to do is put Page Smith. Boom, you'll get it. Or if you know the name of the book, put that in there. They'll find it for you. So yes.
I have one question for you, and it may not even be appropriate, but when you're talking about the brain, and you're talking about sports injuries and decreasing possible connections in the brain, if you have a child that falls on their head when they're very young, and they have trouble with long-term memory,
Right.
could that possibly be a cause for it?
Yes.
And is there help for that?
Yes, there is. Those are treatable. Dr. Amon, his clinics are dedicated to those kind of brain injuries, ADD, drug addicts. He makes a case for people who are criminally violent and committed murder. Their brains are changed, and he questions whether they're really responsible or not. Do they have free will? But I don't know about that. I mean, I think free will is something different, but they're really not. They don't think the same. Their executive function, their judgment is flawed. And he said, so your defense lawyer is going to say, hey, you put a crazy man to death. So, but there are changes. Physically, you can see them. And those you can see kids that are 19 or 20 that have had injuries when they were young. You can see that there is an evolution. There's a dark spot there. It's a dead spot.
Well, in this case, I've got a daughter that called when she was like 1.5, rushed to the emergency room, and they said, actually, she should have broken her neck because she's very young, didn't break. But over the years, she has trouble with long-term memory. She'll learn something, and 2 days later, it's like gone.
Yeah. Well, she'd be a good candidate for evaluation.
She's successful. She's a college graduate.
Yeah.
But she struggles with that short term. Where would I turn to give her some help?
Yeah, go to the nearest Haman clinic, and they're around. I mean, the closest one. So I looked at it. There weren't any in tech. There weren't any in the Midwest, but there's 9 of them.
A-M-E-N?
Yeah, A-M-E-N, like Amen. Amen clinics. Okay, they specialize in that. Yeah. So we have time for we're going to do a symposium, I think, later. Is that when there's more questions, or what's the deal?
A panel.
Panel?
Yes.
And then they can ask more questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And by then, how's that doing over there? Oh, yeah, so that's still a big, yeah. But, one other thing, though, is like, okay, the adult, we call kids that are 18 adults, but really their judgments, the area of their brain responsible for wisdom isn't really mature till they're about 25. And auto insurance companies know this. They knew it well before Dr. Amon figured it out. So there's still a lot of change in wisdom. And wisdom is something that, it's a gift. It's a gift. But that's what we show. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was great. I'd like to present to you a plaque from the Alzheimer's Association. This is a painting from a patient with Alzheimer's. We created that, and Thank you so much for the education that you give to the community. We appreciate it very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone to stand up.